Hey, Pepin.
Yo, yo.
I've been thinking a lot lately about lying.
Lying?
Yeah, when you have the truth, but you don't use it.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about that and how you're a fucking liar.
Me?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
How dare you accuse me of lying, sir? I challenge you to a discussion.
I accept.
We need to talk.
Welcome back. So glad you guys could join us. I am here once again with my best friend, Nathan Pepin. How's it going, Pepin?
I am not a liar.
Listen, everybody lies.
Oh.
We've known this for
House.
so many days.
Okay, well, now that you put it in context of a house quote, yeah, I agree.
So tell me about some times people have lied to you.
Well, I mean, there's the obvious example. We've touched upon in the past Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny. I mean, people lie about things a lot, like to children especially. Like, children are just who you lie to in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you tell kids that, there's not like a vagina that, births babies. There's not semen inseminating vaginas. No, it's the stork.
I think it's less you saying there's no semen and more just not talking about it.
It's avoiding. Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, all right, kids, today we're going to talk about non-semen. It's not a thing, so don't ask about it. Speaking of the stork. So you're saying that you lie exclusively to kids?
Not exclusively. I mean, most of the lies you receive in your lifetime are when you're a kid. People just make up shit to you. Like, good example is drugs. We get lied to extremely about drugs, and there's stuff that we're told which is true, but then it's like so much of what we learned in school, in drug ed, also sex ed, it wasn't fault. I mean, it just wouldn't pan out to be that way. And I think our sex ed was better than most sex eds, but from what I've heard across the country, especially in more kind of conservative areas, like the sex ed they get taught is like, it's like terrible. Like, it's just basic lies.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad that our school was a little more reasonable on sex ed and told us about vaginas biting off dicks before you're married. Like, you have to go through the bond of marriage before those teeth will recede. And I'm just really glad that they didn't lie about that and be like, oh yeah, go have sex all the time, because then I'd have my dick bitten off.
I've had my dick bitten off more than one time, and it's been very painful each time.
But at least it grows back.
Yep.
And a little bit longer every time.
Yep.
Buy yourself a snapping turtle. Okay. So I think so talk to me about lying to kids. I feel like lying in general is a very short-term solution to a long-term problem for the majority of times that you would lie. And I think that's the same for kids.
It's see, I don't know if I disagree or agree with it with kids.
You're better off lying to an old person than you are to a child.
I think that a lot of times, so this is where it's confusing. So Christmas, that's a positive lie. Okay, no, I'm going to rephrase this. That's a lie that has added stuff to it. You're not just like avoiding telling them something, explaining something they wouldn't get. Rather, you're creating this fictional kind of thing. It's a fictitious lie. But then there's the kind of lie where you kind of just tell them an oversimplification or something that's not true. And that's more of a lie to just avoid explaining something. Like, let's say that a child actually was interested in where babies came from. So you could give them like a pretty basic story about, vaginas and, how the whole thing works. And I think my parents actually did that for me. And, we understood it well enough. We actually wanted to see where my mom's vagina was, because we were 4. But it's like, sometimes you can't explain things. You're just cringing right there.
I'm just trying really hard not to make a really bad joke, so please keep moving.
So it's like, that's an opportunity where you might lie, because there's things that you can't really explain to a kid. Like, okay, let's imagine this guy is like kind of angry because he just got fired and he's getting fucked over by his boss, and is, you see him storm out and he's doing all these things. Mommy, why is that guy mad? Like, oh, he's just having a bad day, honey. Right. So that's not really the reason why.
Well, I mean, it is.
It kind of is, but it's kind of skirting around the issue.
I don't know. I think that I feel like there's a difference there, like between a blatant lie and not over explaining something. Like, that's an oversimplification. Like, he's having a bad day. He arguably could be the worst day of his life. Like, who knows? But I think that it's not incorrect or misleading to say he's having a bad day, because the kid doesn't need to know all those details to understand the core concept and be able to empathize, which I would imagine would be the goal. Okay, so conceptually, I don't like lying. I think that you have a duty as a human being to be as honest as possible, because there's already enough fucked up shit going on, and the world is already confusing enough to comprehend as a human being without the addition of having to question if your own thoughts and processes and understanding is right or wrong because somebody else's disagrees with yours. Like, whose reality is correct if somebody's lying to you. I think it's a basic human necessity and obligation for you to be honest. But I know in college, if you had asked me, hey, Steve, do you enjoy rooming with me? I would definitely say yes, because it would be really uncomfortable to say no. But I think that was an awful situation. Those rooms are way too small for two adult humans to be living together. And our schedules of how we liked things were very clashing. I would often get on your nerves and vice versa. Now, comparative to other people I could have lived with and been way more frustrated, I think living with you was great. But did I enjoy living in that environment? No. But I would have lied to you in that situation, because I think that it would be a reasonable thing to lie about. And I think that you would have done the same.
Well, yeah, because the context there is not... I mean, so there's like the subtext to the question. So it's like, if there's the classic example of the wife asking their husband, does this dress make me look fat? The wife's not actually asking if that dress makes her look fat. What she's actually asking is, do I look attractive? Do you find me attractive? Right. She's not actually looking for confirmation about that, whether she's fat or not, but she's looking for something else. And so if you read into the subtext, you don't say, honey, that doesn't make you look, well, actually you would say that, but you say, honey, you look beautiful, because that's what she really wants. She's asking about something else, but there's a subtext to that. Or if you're kind of talking to somebody in like a dating context, and you might be conversing about one thing, but then the subtext is something completely different. And so you actually respond to the subtext there. So, and you telling me that you actually like rooming with me, I mean, that's built into the context. Like, maybe you didn't like every aspect to it. There's certain aspects that weren't enjoyable, so on and so forth like that. But it's like, for you to say that, like, I didn't enjoy it, like, that has a different kind of meaning because of the context. Like, for you to say that it's awkward because there's a context built into that, which is by saying that you enjoyed it, it's, you value me as a person, that there's some good aspects to it. It's something you don't regret. It could have been worse. All those things are kind of built into your response.
It makes me think about how many things come across as lies that aren't necessarily intended that way and are rather just miscommunication. So if I say, I did not like living with you in college, you may take that to mean I don't like you, or I didn't like being around you, and that may not be my intention. My intention could have been, I didn't like this one specific aspect of, or I don't like rooming with anybody, could be what I really mean. So I think that the breakdown of language in general and the difficulty that communication truly brings about in and of itself leads to a lot of things that seem like they could be lies, but that's not their intention. It's rather a miscommunication. But I want to talk about blatant lying. Both people understand what is being conveyed, and the intention of person one is to misconstrue the truth in order to get a certain reaction out of person two, or make them understand something incorrectly as to what reality is.
See, this is where I think it gets a little tough, because I think there's clear distinctions there. But one distinction that's kind of hard to get past, which I've had issues with sometimes, is I'm kind of a troll. Like sometimes I say things to get reactions. I don't say things seriously, but people take me seriously from time to time, and the way they come at me is like, you said this, like you were lying to me about that. I'm like, well, no, like that was never serious. Like, but you kind of feel like one of those people when you start saying that, where it's like, those people who are like passive aggressive towards you, and they're kind of saying all these things, but they kind of play it off as jokes. That's what it comes across like, when I start saying that. But it's like, I feel like anyone who was actually like hearing my words would have actually understood that I never meant what I was saying.
And it's a huge distinction between what's said and what's felt. And I know I was talking to a guy at work, and he was explaining how he went to a marriage counselor because that's sometimes what you have to do in marriage to make it work. And that one of the things that he really, really took away from that, and he's always tried to keep in mind going forward, is that he hears things as they're said. So the words are literal, and exactly what he means is what he says. But his wife feels the things that are said. So if he says one thing, he may be meaning that exact thing, but his wife may take it to feel a different way, that he feels he's saying something. So in her reality, what he said was X, but what he thought he was saying was Y. And that's a breakdown in communication. That is not what I want to talk about with this topic. I want to talk about blatant lying, not a miscommunication, not something where, it was somebody thought that this was meant, or it was a joke and it wasn't taken that way. You said something to me and we both understood it, and it was on purpose that you were misleading me. Or anybody. Let me give you an example. My grandmother, real scared about everything in the world because she watches Fox, real scared about drugs, asks me, have you ever done drugs, Steven? There is no universe where I'm going to say yes to that. And I'm going to lie to her face, and I'm going to say no. Or I'm going to completely avoid the question in an effort of not having to lie. But either way, I am not going to lie to her and absolutely break her heart and make her worry about me, because the truth is, she is asking a question out of concern, and that is not a concern she needs to have. And that's what I want to convey to her. So in a way, I'm doing what you were saying with how you're assuming what the wife wants to hear is you look beautiful, not you're not fat. And I think that in and of itself is a breakdown in communication, but sometimes it can work in your favor when it really is for everybody's best interest to say something that doesn't have 100% validity if it's getting across the same concept.
I agree, but it's also a dangerous path, because so for instance, something I lied about when I was dating the first girl, so my first girlfriend, something I lied to her about was my drug use, because at the time I was using marijuana, and she asked
using marijuana.
I was using marijuana, and so
it's a great spice.
So she
spices up my chicken jerky.
So she asked me, I think 2 or 3 different times if I smoked pot, and I was like, no. So I told her no, not because I wanted to lie to her, but because I thought that I knew where she was standing, and I didn't want to have that discussion with her because I didn't think she was really capable of having that discussion. Which is a little bit assumptive to make.
Wow, what a statement!
And so this is teenage Nate, so let's put that into context there.
I'm just saying, you sound like a shitbag.
But it's same thing with your grandmother though. Like, is your grandmother really going to be capable of having that conversation? She's not really informed about drugs.
I've had really hard conversations with her, and we've agreed to disagree on a lot of things, and that's just not one that I think she'll ever understand, because she had the dare type of schooling about what drugs are. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's different when you're talking about somebody who's 70 years disconnected from you versus somebody you're the same age as saying they won't understand.
But maybe the way to put it is not that they don't. it's not that they won't understand, but their mind's already made up, and they don't really want to have an argument. They want to have me agree with them. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a difference between who you're lying to, and if it's somebody that you're dating that you have such a fundamental disagreement on and you're not able to actively talk about it, that is a huge red flag. For me, if there's not honesty, I'm not interested. End of story. If I can't be blatantly honest with you about everything, why bother? But go on. This is teenage Nate, and I lied to my girlfriends when I was that age about doing drugs. So I 100% agree. Get where you're coming from.
yeah, so it's, I lied, and I had a rationale for lying, but that rationale I'm saying is similar to the rationale that you're using for your grandmother in a certain kind of way. And so it might be appropriate for your grandmother because there's that relationship there, and she's old. She's gonna die, at some point. It's like, is it really worth it to kind of bring this into this relationship when there's no real gain? Because all you're gonna do is just gonna do damage to it. And you could say honesty is really important for the relationship. You could say that the relationship I have with my girlfriend's different because this is like not a involuntary relationship, but rather it's a voluntary one where two people come together and we're voluntarily associating. Those are all true. But my point is that you start with your grandmother and it can get worse in that kind of way. So you start applying to your girlfriend, then your friends, and then just people in general. And so it's a very slippery slope to start lying in that kind of way. And because the tough thing for me is if I don't think someone's going to be capable of having that argument, then that's the issue I have. Because one reason why I don't often talk about my politics with people is people can't have political debates. We do pretty decent with our political debates, I think, but it's because we actually discuss the topic. We actually hear each other out. But when I tend to have political debates with people, what ends up happening is that person will start saying, "Oh yeah, you're a Trump supporter," or "You this, you that," "Oh, you Republican." And it's like, I'm not arguing. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm not saying anything. I'm just bringing another point of view here because you're just claiming I'm more arguing against you than I'm arguing for some other position. Like, that's the issue I have. And do I really want to get into that? Because if people ask me what my thought is on this, for me to actually say that, it's like it never is productive.
So my way to circumnavigate that, because I agree to give your honest opinion on certain topics, knowing that they're either asking it to start a fight or it's going to start an argument that one party or both are not capable or willing to have, is to say, I'm not interested in talking about that, which is honest, and it gets me out of it. And it's been amazing to me the amount of times I've been able to just say no, and that's a legit answer.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. And like that's a legit answer, but people are afraid to say no, and they're afraid to say I don't know. And it leads to a lot of lies and a lot of people making shit up that isn't necessary. Just be honest and say I don't know. Like it's and I catch myself sometimes answering questions that I don't know the answer to, and then I'm like, why am I saying this? Like, I don't know the answer. And then at the end I'll be like, but honestly, I don't know enough to actually be talking about this. That's just what I think. And that, I feel, kind of saves it in a way.
Sometimes you think you know the answer, but you really don't.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to like open that box to actually like understand that you don't know the answer. It's like sometimes internally I think I understand something, and then when I actually start explaining that thing, like there's a hole right there. Oh, there's a hole right there too. Why is that the case? I don't know. And so it's like I actually don't know what I'm talking about often. And sometimes it happens on the podcast. Like I'll be describing some circumstance or situation, and I think I know what I'm talking about. Then it's like, what? What is this even happening here?
But I still feel like that's less of a lie than like when someone is blatantly being untruthful. Like, you know the truth and you're choosing to say something different of it. And usually it's to save yourself.
Yeah, I feel very weird. Like, I'm trying to avoid this because I don't like the sensation. I don't like thinking about people who have lied to me. But when people do that, it gets me kind of. it's not like angry. Angry is not the term, but it's like
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
disgusted. Disgusted is, I think, it's kind of like, God, what are you? Like it kind of makes them not human in my perspective. And it's like I get that sometimes people they say things which aren't lies in the moment. They just didn't think about it. So I don't expect to be held to everything I say because I'm liable to get the wrong thing. Like we might have a conversation and I might say I might make some sort of statement, right? And that statement may have been incorrect, but maybe I was just wrong in my memory or wrong in my logic at the moment. Maybe I should have known something, but I didn't at that moment right there. So I don't think you should hold someone to everything they say. But if something is deliberate in the kind of way you're saying, where someone is aware of what the right answer is or what they're aware of the truth and they say the opposite, that's where I have an issue. So an example, as a manager at my previous employment, you would come across employees who would make up lies about why they can't come into work all the time. And people would lie about these things, and you'd catch them in the lies. Or they would say they worked there in a certain time, and you find that they wouldn't. And this is like, it just kind of changes your perception of that person. Because you're like, oh, wow. So what else are you going to lie to me about? You know, what else are you going to tell me? Like, because the whole relationship between me and that person is based on trust. And then once you kind of invalidate that trust, that fundamental trust that you are actually just lying, like you weren't actually sick. You just wanted to go, like, you know, spend time with your girlfriend or your family or something like that. That's what I have an issue with. And that it kind of just changes my perception of the person.
It's really hard to overcome once you know somebody's been lying to you. How do you know if they're telling the truth ever again? Versus if they've never lied to you, it's easy to just believe that they're telling you the truth because they haven't given you a reason not to. But I think a lot of people are the opposite, that they always distrust people even after they've proven time and time again that they're telling the truth. I think a lot of that comes down to your own frame of mind and how you comprehend people in general and your own trust levels for people outside of yourself. I personally like to believe that everyone's telling the truth until I find out otherwise, because I don't have the heart to believe that the whole world is a lie and that people are bad. I would not be able to wake up in the morning if I believed that, truly.
I think lies are different than promises. Because, like, let's say that we have a plan to meet up and do a podcast, or that I make a date with somebody and, you know, we're going to have a date somewhere. So if you said you're going to be there and then you don't show up or you cancel or something like that, it's not lying, I don't think, because it's not, because you said you're going to be there. You could say that you lied to me. You said you were going to be there, but it's more a promise you're making or a something to that effect. It's not like a lie, though. It's not the same as, you know, what were you doing on Tuesday? Oh, I was washing the carpet, when you really were like at Funtown Splashdown, USA.
Well, I think the thing with a broken promise is that a promise is you're saying this is a guarantee, and then if you break that for whatever reason, then you no longer, like, what is your word worth at that point if your word wasn't enough to bind you to that agreement? I think a broken promise with a good reason is one thing, but I think a lot of times a broken promise breaks the trust, so the reason automatically becomes an excuse and disbelieved regardless. Unless it's a really good one or their track record has proven otherwise.
I mean, I think that there is context into any kind of promise made. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, let's say that you and I make some sort of plan. Mm-hmm. Or let's say, not say you and I, because we're kind of different. We're different species on this. But let's say that me and my friend make a plan to hang out. We kind of understand that plan is kind of like not set in stone, right? If something comes up for either one of us, we can cancel plans or rearrange or do whatever with that. But it's not a promise to actually hang out. It's more just a general kind of vague plan, and that's what we'll go with if it works out. But that's different than saying I absolutely will be there. So one instance of this might be, say, graduation. So if let's say there's some circumstance where, let's say you're graduating and then your father, your long lost father, who never shows up to anything, he says he promises he'll be there, then he doesn't show up. Well, that's a bit different because it wasn't just like a general kind of plan that was not had much stakes to it, but that had stakes to it. There was a promise to be there. He didn't show up for that. So that has a different thing. That's more of a lie in my mind. Whereas if you just make a general plan, the context, just to hang out, just to chill, or have some sort of date, there's not this kind of binding, crazy contract, or as much as there is in that other instance. And when I was saying that we're kind of different species, like when you and I make a plan, it almost always happens. And then if something comes up with it, like we kind of, the question's not so much like, did you lie to me? It's kind of like we try to figure out what went wrong. So, for instance, we made plan to do a podcast today, right? Last week. There's a giant storm. And then we had a conversation about maybe not doing the podcast today because you take like an hour to drive here.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. And so with it being a storm in New England, like it's not going to be very good. So I thought we had canceled the podcast for today. And ends up we didn't. Because I was hanging out here, and then here knock on my door, and I'm like, what? Who's here? Like I thought someone's gonna ask me to move my car to snow. Then it's Steve. I'm like, what?
And in my head, my intention was to say, there's supposed to be a storm on Sunday. I don't know how long it's gonna go because it's New England weather. So if it goes into Monday and the roads are too bad to drive, we'll cancel plans. And you thought it was the other way around, that let's cancel plans, and if the roads are good enough to drive, I'll let you know and we'll reconfirm the plans. So in my head, there was no doubt I was coming today, unless things were dire. And in your head, I was not going to show up, and if I texted you, you'd be surprised. So that's fascinating to me. But we immediately identified the problem and started recording. It wasn't a big deal because neither of us had malice in our intent. That's a miscommunication.
It was miscommunication, but we weren't. It wasn't like Pepin, you weren't ready for this because you understood that if I understood the situation correctly, I would have been ready to podcast. I would have expected you, and then understand that if you understood my perspective, that it would have been the same kind of way.
I would have texted you first thing this morning if I had thought about it. And honestly, I should have, just because I always reconfirm plans. But regardless, everything worked out. We're here recording.
I would have felt so I went to the gym and did some grocery shopping this morning. It would have been terrible if you showed up when I wasn't here.
I was just thinking about that. Every time I pull into your place, I'm like, what if his car's not there? Now I'm going to have to sit in his driveway. It's going to be weird. I'm going to text him. He's not going to answer. But everything worked out. It always does. And we make it work.
Yeah, certainly. And this episode's getting a little bit long, so I think we should maybe split it into 2 episodes, just for the heck of it. So if you want to check out next week's episode, wait a week. It'll be there a week from now. Or if you want to find us on Twitter, it's twitter.com/WNTT1 or facebook.com/We Need to Talk Show. We also have a Patreon. We're on Podcast NH, and you guys, we'll see you next week on the show. We Need to Talk.
Hey everyone, it's Matt Zikoria from the Behavioral Observations Podcast. We provide stimulating talk for today's behavior analyst. But if you're not a behavior analyst, you don't even know what a behavior analyst is, well, that's okay too, because we have lots of interesting things going on here at the podcast. We talk about all sorts of things related to behavioral sciences. So if you want to check it out and learn more about what this show is all about, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcastnh.com. Thanks for checking it out.